sisters in Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa sallam. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tanzil khayr wa nasta'in ya rahman rahimin. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى ال سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful is He. We send abundant blessings and salutations upon the last and final Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us and to make it difficult. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all knowledge and grant us all understanding. Ameen, thumma ameen. Once again, welcome to another session on Islamic jurisprudence, where we'll be dealing with the laws pertaining to the performance of prayer. And for indeed, this is the second to last class, inshaAllah ta'ala. And next week we'll be having the last session pertaining to this topic of Salah, prayer. And over the last 4 sessions, we covered some of the pillars of Salah in prayer. We covered the conditions in prayer. We covered some of the preconditions in the prayer, and we also mentioned some of the wajibat, some of the essential actions in the prayer, and wherever we discussed that some scholars mention the takbir al-tahrima sometimes coincide as being a pillar of the prayer as well, and why they mention it to be a pillar. And we discussed some of the sunnah or the sunan of the prayer, whereby if a person were to forget the sunnah in the prayer, then therefore he don't have to make sajdatul sahw, okay, the prostration of forgetfulness. But if a person forgot a wajib action or wajib element in the prayer, then therefore you have to make sajdatul sahw, prostration of forgetfulness. And we mentioned the method and the way of performing sajdatul sahw, prostration of forgetfulness, whereby you recite at-tahiyyat, and then you make the salam once, and you make 2 prostrations, and come back up and begin again with at-tahiyyat and darur, and then the dua. Okay? And then you mentioned some of the sunnah of the prayer as well. And we mentioned one of the valid point pertaining to sunnah, whereby the hukum and the ruling for a sunnah action is that if a person leaves it intentionally, he will get a minor sin. Okay? If a person forgets it forgetfully, okay, and not intentionally leaving it out, and therefore there will be no harm upon him. Okay, so this is the ruling of the sunnah. If it is done, you will get rewarded for it. If you leave it out, you will get a small sin. Okay? So inshallah we'll be continuing on the etiquette, okay, adab as-salah. So adab means etiquette or manners. So everything in Islam it regards and deals with adab, etiquette. Likewise, there's etiquette of eating food, there's etiquette of drinking, there's etiquette of sitting in a gathering, there's an etiquette of sitting in the masajid. And one of these things as well we need to discuss. And inshallah, maybe in the later on, maybe we can discuss the etiquette of eating and sitting in a gathering and sitting in a masjid. Because most of the time when we come, even for our halqa, even for our dhikr gathering, we forget how to sit in these ways. Sometimes you will find people sitting in a way they stretch their legs and they stretch it towards the imam and towards the direction of the qibla. This is bad etiquette, this is bad adab. Okay? When a scholar or an imam or respected person is sitting in front of you and they are teaching you and you are going on, then you cannot point your foot towards them. This is bad etiquette. Likewise, even in the Jummah, when you come, people will be sitting in a way that the leg will be stretched out. This is against the adab and the etiquette of the masjid when the person is delivering a sermon. So all of these things, when Islam deals with everything, has etiquette, has adab. Okay? So likewise, There's etiquette in salah as well. There's a way when you stand and when you bow and when you make your sajda, when you make your prostration, there's an adab and an etiquette of doing that as well. Because who are you doing it for? You're doing it for your own self. But who are you performing to? Your creator. Okay? So therefore when you come in front of, and this is why it always, I'm always bewildered with this. When we go in front of people, we dress the best. When we have to visit the Prime Minister or the President, when we have to attend a wedding, when we have to attend a walima, when we have to attend a pika, we dress our best and we dress our children the best. But when we are about to perform the salah, we don't have the best attire. We don't care how we look. But indeed, Allah doesn't look at the way you dress. But at the same point in time, if He has given you sustenance, if He has given you risk, in a means so that you can provide for yourself and your family, then therefore you must dress your best. When you come to the masjid, dress your best. When you come for Jummah, dress your best. When you perform in your salah, dress your best. This is the way, because Allah has provided you with this. But if Allah didn't give you enough and you could not afford, then that is something else. Okay? So, one of the jurisprudent points in salah is the adab, the etiquette in our salah. So من آدابها إخراج الرجل كفيه من كميه عند التكبير. So it is from the etiquette of salah, etiquette of prayer, for a man to withdraw his hands from his sleeves at the commencement of the opening Allahu Akbar. So what does that mean? If you have a jubba or kurta or shawal or a gown or etc. or a long shirt, there will be sleeves that sometimes will be loose. And nowadays there are sleeves that has cuffs. Okay, so there's no need to take it out. But sleeves that are long, like this for example, and sometimes a person may be cold, but we live in a tropical island. So this was because that there will be sometimes a person will place their hands inside the sleeves like this, and they will hold it. Okay, so at the beginning of your salah, if you have long sleeves like this, or you're wearing a big t-shirt, etc., but most people they come with a shirt or a jersey, which is so it's fine. But if you have a long sleeve like this, then you must take your hands out of it and do the takbir tahrima up to the elbow properly, and then place them below. Okay. But if it is cold and you think that with your hands might freeze, then it is permissible at that moment to place them into your sleeve once more when you place them underneath your navel. Okay? وَالنَّظَرَ مُصَلِّ إِلَى مَوْضِعِ سُجُودِهِ قَائِمًا وَإِلَى ظَاهِرِ الْقَدَمِ. So it is also recommended to look at the area of prostration when standing. So this is the etiquette of your salah when you are standing. This goes for both males and females. So the place you are about to bow and put your head down, that is the place your eyes should be. And this is from the etiquette of your salah. This is your adab. Because you don't want to start your prayer, takbir tahrima, Allahu Akbar, you place your hands below your navel for the girls, for the females I mentioned before, up on the bosoms with their hands, clinch into their chests, as much as possible, and you look towards the direction you're about to prostrate. This is from the etiquette. Okay, so you don't want to start for the females looking around, for the males, and there are people who do this as well. Okay, so this is, you have to concentrate. This is part of your etiquette. Okay, so sometimes even I have seen within myself in this masjid and other masjid as well. So someone will sneeze and person will pray and he might do so. So as soon as you do this and you turn your face in the direction of the Qibla, the salah is broken. Okay? Remember this. Your body, your physique has to always be in the direction of the Qibla, the direction of your prayer, what you're performing. As soon as you move your body away from the Qibla, as soon as you move your face from the Qibla, your salah is broken, is null and void. You have to repeat the salah from the beginning and start again with takbir tahrim. Okay, remember this. Okay. At the top part of the feet when bowing. So when you looking when you are bowing in the position of ruku, there are two things. You can look in between the feet or on top of the feet. Okay? So if, for example, a person might have on nice socks, so now he might be looking at his socks right through. Alright? So in that moment, if you think so, you look between your feet as well. Okay? You know, it happens, you know, some of the young boys nowadays, they get a new nice Jordan socks, Nike socks, and then they're really looking how pretty it is. Nice. Okay? These things may obstruct you from your concentration. So this is why it is from the etiquette of your salah to look at these spots. Okay, so it won't obstruct you from your being present in your salah. Okay? And when in the sajda, you look at the tip of the nose when in prostration, at the lap when sitting, and at the shoulders when giving the final salam. So when you're in the atayyat position, the sitting positions, if there's 2 rakat, then that will be a final sitting. If there are 4 rakat in your first sitting, from the 4 rakat, you will look at your lap. Okay? And when you're in the last sitting as well, you will look at your lap. And when you're making the salam, you will look at your shoulders. Many people when they do salam, they go, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Even though it is permissible, but from the etiquette, remember this is the adab, this is the way of performing your salah. You will look at your shoulder. Your eye, you can check the shoulder, alright? You turn to the left, your eye will look at your shoulder. And then you can look up after. Okay? And there are sometimes people may swing the whole body. Salam. Okay? No need to do so. It's just the neck. Okay? Little. This is the etiquette of performing the prayer. Okay? And it is also recommended to resist coughing as much as one is able to. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean you can't cough. Okay? If a person has a cough, then therefore it is sometimes very hard to prevent yourself from coughing. Okay? So if you have a cough at that moment, you will be excusable. But now sometimes you may just get a little small, little tiny cough during your prayer. At that moment you must try to suppress it as much as you are able to. If you can't, then therefore you can let it out, no problem. Okay? But there is also an etiquette in coughing in the salah as well. If you cannot suppress that cough, then therefore it is recommended for you to raise your right arm little and bring it to your mouth when coughing. Okay? So if you can't suppress the cough, you want to cough, bring it in. Okay? This is the etiquette. It is also recommended to keep the mouth closed when yawning. Okay? So you know, you wake up in the morning for Fajr, you're still tired, and you still feel a little bit sleepy, and you start your Fajr Salah, and the Imam start a long surah. All Surah Yasin. Hey, and you know you're tired, you work whole day yesterday, and then you have to reach to work again for 7 o'clock. So you think, hey, and you start to feel the yawn coming in. So at that moment when you feel a yawn coming in, from the etiquette is to suppress that yawn as well. So much so, the ulama, the scholars of Islam, have mentioned that you should bite your lip if to suppress that yawn whilst it's coming in. That you should bite it. Can you imagine? So when the yawn is coming in, bite down on the lip so much so that they feel the pain and biting the lip to suppress the yawn. Okay? And if a person now, he becomes unable to suppress his yawn, then he should cover his mouth with his hand or sleeve. So with the cough he'll raise, if he can suppress, and cough into his elbows. But with the yawn and he cannot fight it now, then he'll cover his hand with the back of his right and cover it. Not with the front. Okay, so the same way you raise your hand and cover it. And one of the way of etiquette as well in yawning, not in the salah as well, in yawning by itself, is that you suppress by saying, ah. You know when people yawn and make that noise, even self, you must also suppress that silent sound when yawning. Okay? And the reason for this is because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, and he said that yawning in prayer is from the devil. Okay? So if any of you yawn, then he should close his mouth as much as he is able to. Okay? And this hadith is recorded in Jami' al-Tirmidhi in the book of prayer, hadith number 370. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when any of you would yawn in the prayer, and specifically for the salah in the prayer, then he should suppress it as much as he's able to. Okay, so this is why it's mentioned, in a way to suppress it, you have to bite down onto the lip. But there are some people who try to close their mouth as powerful as well. That is also applicable, and you can also do as well. Okay. It is also recommended to stand for the prayer at the time the mu'adhin says, قَدْ قَامَتُ الصَّلَاةِ. Okay, so what does that mean? And I mentioned this in the first class as well, in the first session. And again, it is from the etiquette of the salah. Okay, so this is not my words. Okay, this is the words of the Jewish scholars. So when the mu'adhin is about to call the iqamah, whilst everyone is sitting, okay, then as soon as he says, for the qamah to salah, stand and prepare yourself for the prayer, that is the moment you will rise up and start to form the rows. Okay, for the qamah to salah, that's the moment you should be all walking towards and forming the rows. So when he says for the qamah to salah, everyone should rush. So by the second one now, the row should already be formed. Today in many Muslim communities and Muslim masajid, we have forgotten this etiquette performing towards our salah. And when the mu'azzin, he finished this entire iqamah, then all of us now come in to stand and form the rows, etc., making sure it's straight, making sure we stand shoulder to shoulder. So part of the etiquette of a congregational prayer, not if you perform by yourself. In a congregational prayer, the etiquette is when the mu'adhin says, for the qamah to salah, when you hear that first one, everyone should rush and start to perform and form their rows. So when you finish with the second one, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, it is also permissible for the imam to start the salah one time without him completing the iqamah as well. Okay, so the muazzin don't need to finish the iqamah. The imam can just say Allahu Akbar. Okay, this is from the etiquette of a congregational prayer, and we should establish this as well. Not only in our masjid, but all masjid throughout, because this is from the etiquette. And Muslims are people with etiquette. Okay. It is also recommended that the imam begin the prayer when the caller says, قَدْ قَامَتُ الصَّلَاةِ, as I just mentioned before. But one thing here we must note among the Ahnaf, Imam Muhammad and Imam Zuhur, whereas Imam Abu Yusuf stated that it is bad to begin once the call to commence the iqamah has finished, as held by the majority of scholars in the Hanafi madhab. As I mentioned before, it is also recommended that if the mu'adhin, he says, قَدْ قَامَتُ الصَّلَاةِ, قَدْ قَامَتُ الصَّلَاةِ, the imam can just say, Allahu Akbar, start the prayer. But the majority from the Ahnaf scholars have said that the mu'adhin should complete the iqamah so that no one will feel like, hey, if someone starts now, people will be like, hey, something is wrong. So that's why it's recommended to finish the iqamah first, and then the imam will start the prayer with the takbir of Allahu Akbar. So because if you do that in some places, and the mu'adhin said, let's say you say Allahu Akbar, hey, the iqamah never finished. You know? So this is why it is recommended to finish the iqamah first. Okay? Any questions? So now we will the kayfiyya tartib as-salah, the way the prayer is performed. Okay? When one intends to perform salah, he is to withdraw his hands from the sleeves, though not for a female. So if a female has long sleeves like most abaya has, okay, then therefore she don't need to withdraw her hands. So when she makes takbir tahrima, Allahu Akbar, she can have them in her hands and her sleeves. Okay? But for the males, they should take it out. Okay? And then raise them to the level of the ears and utter the opening Allahu Akbar. Okay? So when you take it out, Allahu Akbar up to the earlobe. But if you feel like you can't raise them up to the earlobe, then raise them up to the chin. If you feel you can't raise them up to the chin, then at least up to the shoulders. Okay, for the Hanafi method. Okay? A person is to form his intention of the prayer when he says Allahu Akbar. So one of the performance of the prayer is that when you say takbir for a certain prayer that you're about to perform, you make your intention with the takbir as well. So if you perform in Salatul Isha, you will say, oh Allah, I intend to perform Salatul Isha. Allahu Akbar. Okay? It is valid to begin prayer with any pure glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High. Is like to say Subhanallah wa la ilaha illallah. What does that mean? When you make takbir tahrima and you place your hand on the navel for the females upon the bosom, there is something known as the thana, and related that from the sunnah actions, which is to say Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. So if a person never memorized this, then therefore he can say Subhanallah, or he can just say La ilaha illallah. Okay? So he can, but these pure words he must say. Okay? From Subhanallah or La ilaha illallah. He cannot say Insha'Allah or Astaghfirullah or any of these words. So the pure words pertaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? If he has not memorized the Thana. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك. If he has not memorized this, then therefore it is allowed for that individual, that person, that sister to just say Subhanallah, and then she can start the Salah. Okay? Thereafter, one is to place his right hand over the left hand under the navel without delay after the opening Allahu Akbar. Again, this is something you have to understand. As soon as you say Allahu Akbar, hands have to go on you immediately. Sometimes you find people, when they do takbir tahrima, you find them doing so. Allahu Akbar. So they fix themselves. Allahu Akbar. This is from against the etiquette and the performance of the prayer. Once you do takbir tahrima, Allahu Akbar, hands have to tie immediately after and below the navel. For the females, Allahu Akbar, one time. Okay? So you can't try to shiver. That's why before the salah, if you're in congregation and you hear the mu'adhin say, "Qala qamati salata," you form yourself and you fix yourself properly first, one time. Then we go. Okay? So after placing the hands over the left hand under the navel without any delay after the Allahu Akbar, thereafter he recites the thana. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Okay? And it is also sunnah upon anyone who prays to begin with this opening glorification. So the best when beginning is to start with this thana first. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa tabarak. This is the best. Okay? One is then to say ta'awud. And I will mention what is ta'awud. To say a'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. So after reciting the thana, he will recite the ta'awud, a'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim, and then he will recite basmala, which is to say bismillah ar-rahman ar-rahim. Okay? And then he is to recite Surah Al-Fatiha in that order. Okay? And any surah that which he has memorized, or at least 3 verses. Okay? And if he is in a gathering or if he is following the Imam, then from the performance of the prayer, when he hears the Imam reach Wala Dali, then he is to say Ameen softly. Okay? And remember, if he is leading if the Imam is leading the Salah, then we are those who are following behind him are to remain silent. Should not recite no surah Fatiha or no surah. They remain silent so long they are performing the salah behind the Imam. Okay? And one is then to say takbir while moving downwards into the bowing posture and pause for a moment in serenity. So what does that mean? So after you have recited and do the takbir tahrima, place the hand below the navel, the thana, ta'awud, tasmiyah, Surah Al-Fatiha and the surah or 3 verses, then therefore you will go straight into ruku, Allahu Akbar. So here they mention that you travel the Allahu Akbar the moment you take to go into the ruku. So you don't do just say Allahu Akbar, then you go into the ruku. Okay? You should take your takbir the way you go into the ruku. Allahu Akbar. And you stay there for a moment. And then you recite Subhana Rabbiyal Azim 3 times. Okay, which was the sunnah which we did in the previous class as well. And he will place his head evenly with his buttocks and holding the knees with his hands, extending the fingers. And then uttering the tasbih, Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times, which is the minimum. Okay? So anyone who says to say Subhana Rabbil Azim once, this is not the minimum. Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times according to the Ahnaf is the minimum. Okay? Thereafter he is to rise and pause for a moment at ease when he says Sami Allahu liman hamida, pause for a moment, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And he goes back down into the sajda with the same mentioning of the Allahu Akbar, into the prostration, into the sajda. Okay? After that, one is to say, when declining to prostration, to place his knees on the ground, then his hands followed by his face between his hands. He is to perform the prostration with his nose and forehead and pause for a moment. So when going down, the first thing first is what? The knees, okay? Then the hands, and then the face by between the palms. Okay, so the face was placed in between the palms. Okay, and then the nose and the forehead. So when going down in prostration, first thing, you go down with your knees. Then you go down with your palms, and then touching your forehead and your nose. Okay, this is the performance of your prayer. And then when you pause for that moment, you will say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la 3 times. Okay? Glory be to the Most High. In the prostration, one is to distance his abdomen from his thighs and distance his upper arm from the armpits when there is no crowd or cramming. Okay? And he is to direct the fingers of his hands and toes of his feet towards Qibla. So for the male, his hands must be away from his abdomen, so it has some space on his armpits if there is no crowd or cramming, as I mentioned previously as well. When you go down, arms must be up, okay? Elbows must be up, away from the abdomen. But for the females, the arms must be in the abdomen, okay? For the females, arms must be in the abdomen, and elbows must be on the ground as much as possible, okay? He is then to rise from prostration saying Allahu Akbar and adopt the sitting posture between 2 prostrations, pausing for a moment in serenity, placing the hands on the thighs, and he then utters the takbir and prostrates for the second time and pause for a moment at ease, during which he says Subhana Rabbil A'la again. So when you've gone on for the first prostration, you come back up, you say Allahu Akbar, put your hands on your lap, pause for a moment, and you will make a dua as recommended. You don't need to say anything as well. It is recommended that you say Allahumma ghfirli, oh Allah, forgive me. And then in that moment you go down again by saying Allahu Akbar into the second prostration. Okay? And again you repeat Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, glory be to the Most High. Okay? The second rakat is performed like the first one, with the exception that there is no thana. So the second rakat, you perform it just like how you perform the first, without reciting thana. Okay? It is not sunnah to raise the hands, such as for bowing or when rising from it, except for the opening takbir. Okay? And the takbir of qunut, supplication, witr, and for the additional takbirs of both Eids. So for the Hanafi again, you don't need to raise your hands takbir for any of the positions that you adopt after it. So if you're going down into ruku, you don't need to say Allahu Akbar and raise the hands. You just say Allahu Akbar and go for the ruku. Coming back up, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Going back down for the sajda, Allahu Akbar. No need to raise the hands. The only time you will raise your hands again is the rak'ah. After you recite the Surah Fatiha and a Surah in the third rak'ah, then you raise your hands and say Allahu Akbar, and then you tie them back again underneath the navel and recite dua qunut. If you have not memorized dua qunut, then you can say any dua that which you know. Okay? And outside of prayer, it is also sunnah to raise the hands at the time one sees the Kaaba. So if a person goes for Hajj, okay, he can also raise his hands when he sees the Kaaba by saying Allahu Akbar. Okay? At the time one reaches the black stone, okay, so also when you see the black stone, you can also raise your hand and say Allahu Akbar. Okay? When one is upon Safa and Marwa, the two mountains, okay, this is the Hajj season as well. It's also recommended. You can also raise the hands at that moment as well. That is upon standing where the Kaaba can be seen. One is to say Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, okay, raising the hands, opening them directly towards the sky and supplicating. Okay, so even when one is upon the mountain as well, where you can see the Kaaba, you can also say Allahu Akbar and raise the hands to make his dua. Okay. When one is standing in Arafah and Muzdalifah, it is sunnah to raise the hands there as well. After the first and middle stoning of the Jamrah, okay, it is sunnah to raise them for supplication as well. So when you say Allahu Akbar, you raise them after the stoning of the Jamrah, the 3 pillars where you stone as well. So after that moment, when you finish, you can raise Allahu Akbar and raise the hands and make supplication. When the male completes the second prostration of the second rakat, he is to sit for tashahhud and to spread his left foot and sit upon it while his right foot is upright. So when you're performing your second rakat and you're in a tahiyyat position, your left foot you will be sitting upon for the males. For the females, they'll be sitting upon their buttocks. So the both of the feet, left and right, they try as much to place it to the right direction. Okay, and you will sit on the buttocks, and this is known as tawarruk. What is known as tawarruk? Remember it. Okay, so this is for the females. In the Shafi madhab as well, they also do tawarruk for both males and females. This is why sometimes you will find some of the shuyukh will also sit on the buttocks and they both of the legs facing to the right side. Okay. So when the male completes the second prostration of the second rakat, he is to sit for tashahhud. This is to say at-tayyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi. Okay? And he should spread his left foot and sit upon it while his right foot is upright with the toes directed towards the Qibla. So as much as a person is able to spread his toes to make them face to the direction of the Qibla, as much as you're possible with your right foot for the males, then you do so. If you cannot do all 5 toes, then you do 4. If you cannot do all 4, then do 3. If you cannot do 3, then do 2. If you cannot do 2, then do 1. But if you aren't able to do all 5, then you can place them flat. Okay? This is recommended. But the most is that you try for all 5. Okay? And this is why when growing up, you always, when performing the salah, you should have been trying your utmost best to perform the salah by the 5 toes when bending your right foot in the atayyat position for the males to face the direction of the Qibla. When you grow up and without doing this, it becomes even difficult to try it now. And to do it now, it will be impossible. So you continue the same way you know you've been performing. But this is why when growing up, you should try this all the time. Okay? And during that time, he has to place his hands on his thighs, flattening his fingers. So it shouldn't be crumbled, it should be like this. Flat upon the thighs. Okay? This method of sitting is known as the iftirash. So according to the Shafis, they do adopt the tarruk, and for the Hanafis, we develop the iftirash style. Okay? And the female is to adopt the tawarruk style of sitting. Imam Malik classified the tawarruk style of sitting as sunnah. while Imam Abu Hanifa classifies the iftirash as sunnah. Okay, so we see here, according to the two opinions among the Imams of Fiqh, Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa. So Imam Malik, he mentioned, he says, tawarruq is both sunnah for the males and the females. But Imam Abu Hanifa says, tawarruq is sunnah for the females, but iftirash is sunnah for the males. Okay? He is then to utter the tashahhud as reported by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and indicate with the index finger for shahada. So when you reach the At-Tayyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu wa salamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi, you put out your index finger, okay, and then place it down when complete, okay, and lowering it when affirming illallah. So so you will reach when you say At-Tayyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu wa salamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Put it down, okay. Nothing is to be added to the tashahhud during the first sitting. So if it's the first sitting, then you just recite At-Tayyat only. But in the last sitting, like for the Fajr, okay, if it's 2 rakat only, then you recite Tayyat and the Darood and the Dua after. But if it's the first sitting, this At-Tayyat only. And then you rise back up for the 3rd or the 4th rakat. Okay? A person must not delay the standing for the 3rd rakat. The tashahhud is greeting to Allah, At-Tayyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu, as has been mentioned. Okay? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, said that the Prophet ﷺ took me by the hand and taught me the tashahhud, just as he taught me a surah of Quran and said, say At-Tayyatu lillahi up to its end. Okay? In the same manner and in the same way, one is to recite the Fatiha alone in the last 2 rakats. If there's 4 rakats or there's 3 rakats, you recite the Fatiha alone. Okay? And the tashahhud followed by the Ibrahim. So after in the 4th rakat or in the 3rd rakat, you recite Surah Fatiha alone, and in the last sitting, you recite Durood Ibrahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim, and any dua after it as well. This is recommended. And he then supplicates that which resembles the Quran and Sunnah. Upon completion, the finishing salams are to be made beginning with the right, then the left. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay? And this is the method and the performance of the prayer. Okay? Before we end, inshallah, there's one thing. So this was the performance of prayer for those who are able to stand. So there's also the way for those who are sitting. Okay? So those who are sitting on a chair, one of the ways you must put your chair first and foremost, if you're a person who stands and sits. You know, there are 2 types of people who sit on chairs. Okay? They are the ones who stand, and because they can't bow and go into sajda, they put themselves on the chair. Right? So if a person is that individual who stands and sits, then therefore when he places his chair, it should be at the back. So when he's standing, he's in a line with the person with his shoulder. Because remember, if you're performing in congregation, shoulder to shoulder, not ankle to ankle. Okay? Shoulder to shoulder. Right? So if the person is shoulder to shoulder and he's sitting and standing, then he will line up okay. If the person who is not standing and sitting, then therefore he will align his shoulder with the shoulder of the person next to him if he is sitting. So that will be him from here. Even though he will be standing, obviously. It will be at that level. Okay? So if he is sitting, the same method will apply. His feet must be firmly on the ground. Okay? He can't close the team so, or however he think he wanted to. Feet must place firmly on the ground like he is standing. Okay? Takbir al-Tahrima, Allahu Akbar. Same up to the earlobe. For the male, he will place it below the navel. Same way as well. But if he has a big stomach and he can't reach underneath the navel, there are people with big stomachs and they can't reach underneath the navel, so therefore he will place it upon his stomach, upon his tummy. Okay? Same way, he will look at the place he think he will be performing his prostration. Okay, when sitting. The person who's sitting, he will, in his mind, if he know he was standing, where he will be prostrating his head. So you look at that area. He will recite Isthana, recite Ta'awud, A'udhu Billahi Min Shaitan Rajim, recite Basmala, Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Fatiha, a surah or 3 short verses. And then when he goes for the ruku, the same way, he will say, Allahu Akbar. His hands will be placed on the thighs. Okay? And his shoulder and his back will be bent little for the ruku. Okay? Not all the way for the ruku. It will be bent little, you tilt it, little for the ruku. Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And when going for the prostration, he will just bend more than which he bent for the ruku. Okay? No need to stretch the hands out. You are not touching the floor. Why are you doing this? Okay, you know there are people who stretch their hands out and they place it like this. No need. This is for those who are already touching the ground. You don't need to do this. You have to keep your hand there on your lap, on your thighs. When you go for the ruku, tilt little. And for the sajda, you will tilt more than you bend for the ruku. Okay, remember this. No need to stretch the hand. Subhana Rabbil Ala 3 times. Subhana Rabbil Ala 3 times. And for the eyes for the prostration position, it will be between your feet as well. This is why you place your feet firm and you look there. Allahu Akbar, you raise back up a little. Allahu Akbar, back again for the second prostration. And your feet look in, your eyes look in between your feet. And this is the method for the one who is sitting. Okay? And for the one who is standing, and it will be the same manner, except you will just go back down and sit on his chair. And he will bend little for the ruku and for the prostration. Okay? And the same will apply for the woman folk as well. Okay, when sitting as well. Except the hands will just place upon the bosoms. Okay? Any other questions? No questions? Right?
And if you're lying, for example, if you're sick and you want to pray Salah,
Good question. So remember, Salah is compulsory upon male and female. Only time it is not compulsory upon a female is when she's going through her menses. Okay? And it's not compulsory upon a child who has not yet reached the age of maturity. Other than that, Salah is compulsory. You have to do it. If you miss it, it's a major sin. Okay? You must understand that. So that means even when you are healthy, when you are sick, you have to perform Salah. Okay? Whether your hand is broken, whether your back is broken, whether your leg is broken, whether you are sick, whether you have AIDS, whether you have some type of sickness, you have to perform Salah. Whether you drank alcohol, whether you smoke weed, you have to perform Salah. Okay? Understand this. Many people think that, oh, I drink alcohol yesterday. I'm not going to perform Salah because my Salah not accepted for 40 days. Your Salah will not be accepted for 40 days, but that does not mean you don't have to perform Salah. Some people will say, I thought, I like my partner last night, you know, and I smoke a little bit of marijuana. I ain't come to Masjid tonight. No! You have to come Masjid and perform Salah still. Whatever is between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you have to perform your Salah. Okay? So this is what it means. So even if a person is so sick that he has to lie down on the bed and perform, then therefore the method of doing so, his legs, someone will face him to the direction of the Qibla. Okay, so the bed will turn, if you have to turn the bed, etc. And his legs will be facing to the direction of the Qibla at that moment. That's the only moment he will be able to stretch his leg to the Qibla. Other than that, is disliked for anyone else out of etiquette for the direction of the Kaaba. Okay, so he will place it. If he can move his hands, then the same way. You perform them up to the earlobe or up to the shoulders, how much he can move his hands. But if he can't move his hands, then there's no problem in that as well. Because you know there's some people who are paralyzed with their entire body and all they can move is their head. So if all they can move with their head is the same way, so you move it with his head. Allahu Akbar. For the Qiyam position, he will tilt it for the ruku, little with the head. And then for the sajda, he will tilt it more with the head. If he can move his hands and he can't move anything else on the head, then he raise it up to the earlobe whilst in the blind one in the bed. And you know there are some beds, even in some hospitals as well, they can raise little. So at that moment when you raise little, you do Allahu Akbar, place below your navel, or if you have a big stomach or one that's tummy. Thana, Ta'awud, Tasmiyah, Surah Al-Fatiha, and your Rasulullah. The ruku, if you think you can bend little with your back, then you bend how much you can for the ruku. How much you can for the sajda as well. If you cannot bend at all, then therefore you will bend with your head. The ruku, little, and for the sajda, little. Okay, this is the way and the method of performing whilst on a bed lying down. Okay. Any other questions? All clear?
What about wudu then in that same situation?
Right. So in that position, if the person is able to get someone to do ablution for him, okay, then that person should make ablution for him. Okay, because if he's paralyzed, if he can't move, he can raise himself. So you'll need assistance. Okay, but if he has no assistance at that moment, and the most cases when a person is in that state, they do have assistance.
Yeah.
Right, but remember in that case, in that scenario, if he has no assistance at all, and perhaps he's bedridden and no one is taking care of him, etc. And you know, the time Salah is going away from him and he's in the hospital, and in certain circumstances he did not get to perform the ablution, no one came to help him at that moment, and he don't want to miss his Salah, then therefore what he can do as much as possible is whatever at the side of him to do dry ablution. Okay? You touch it wherever he can reach. Okay? Wherever he can reach, and then he will perform. Okay? But then when he comes back and someone purifies him and make ablution him and wash him or bath him, then therefore he'll have to repeat that salah. Okay? And the one that he performed in tayammum will be considered as a nafil salah. So that will be rewarded for him as a nafil salah. So inshallah we'll end here, and next week will be our last session. Okay? And I want you all to encourage each and every one that this last session we'll be dealing with the imamate. The imamate is those who are responsible and those who are entitled to lead the salah. Okay, so if someone is out, who will lead the salah? If the imam is not there, who will lead the salah? If your father is not home, who's going to lead the salah? If you are in your school performing, who's going to lead the salah? Okay, so this is very important in our today's time as well. So there will be no fighting in the masjid when somebody is not there. Okay, there will be no fighting in other places when someone needs to perform the salah. Inshallah. Okay, والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. نستغفر الله ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت